Good morning, everybody. I'll be brief, but it is my pleasure to welcome all of you here on this beautiful, chilly morning outside. And on behalf of the director, Susan Weber, to welcome you to the Bard Graduate Center, and also to welcome those of you watching around the world on BGC TV, and those elsewhere on West 86th Street. Mentioning West 86th Street leads me to want to acknowledge the fact that the intellectual and social life of the Bard Graduate Center here on the island of Mannahatta unfolds on the ancestral homelands of the Lenni Lenape people. And we can think of that depth of time as we ponder questions of conservation for the rest of the day. The workshop today is part of a research project called Conserving Active Matter. Some of you have been part of that from an early stage. It's basically devoted to helping think about the implications for ideas of conservation and practices of conservation provoked by new materials and new intentionalities for art and artifact making. It itself is part of a longer project. We're now actually in year 7 of a project called Cultures of Conservation that's been generously supported by the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation that is dedicated to creating new pathways of conversation between conservators and conservation scientists on the one hand, and humanists of all stripes on the other, not just art historians. And I can only say that it's been a source of many remarkable conversations here around this table and also scattered through the building over the last 7 years. Last fall, in the workshop devoted to history and active matter, one of the questions that I raised at the time had to do speculatively with the possibilities for imagining a quantum theory of the object. That's to say, to view objects as events, albeit sometimes extremely slow-moving events. A couple days ago, we had the quantum physicist and ceramic artist Hideo Mabuchi here in this room, and so I took the opportunity to pin him against the wall and ask him if the quantum person in his head ever spilled over into the ceramic artist in his head. And he said, actually, no, that the quantum theory was so different from everyday life that it never led him to reimagine the objects that he worked on. So having said that, I nevertheless want to persist in suggesting that there may be something still useful in that analogy, even if only heuristically, because the quantum theory of the object makes us see or think that objects are actually time signatures, that looking at objects through the lens of time, the way perhaps a Renaissance antiquarian or a Northern European who came to Rome in the 1530s, like Hermann Postma, with an open eye, might have seen the material world as, in fact, not just laden with time, but marking time all around. The study of ruins, let's call it that, takes us directly into the central problems of the life of an object, what life is and what an object is, and of course also to the question of degradation, and should we even talk about it as degradation. The European and Chinese Islamic cult of ruins is one long reflection on this. But all of that long reflection, which we could study historically, is also a prompt, in fact, to consider the importance of thinking well. That the role of philosophy is not something to be kept apart from the other human sciences, but thinking conceptually requires thinking well, and it's not something that can be outsourced to another branch of higher education. All of us are responsible to do that. And so, if we see ruins in the landscape, we need to think about it as a prompt to consider the role of time in other aspects of material, but also, why not, psychic life. And it's at this point that archaeology, if that's what we want to call it, blurs into something like phenomenology. And once we are at this place, we are really confronted, as I think we will over the course of this day, with time as the real subject of what we do. Are we to think of it as Ovid prompts us to think about it, as the archenemy, the destroyer, the consumer of all things? Or perhaps, like Bernini, the time brings out the true identity of anything underneath the surface, which is just, as Fernand Braudel would have had us think about it, just the froth on the waves. So these are big questions, and I'm glad that I don't have to answer them. That's your job, and it'll be our pleasure to listen to the answers that you all give us, and it is with great pleasure that I then call upon Ivan and Anne to begin this wonderful day of question asking.